Imagine a leader whose two signature policies, price controls and religious persecution, both failed completely within a decade. You'd call him a disaster. But the same leader's reforms kept an empire alive for over 1,000 years. Diocletian's price edict collapsed. His persecution of Christians backfired spectacularly, yet his institutional changes sustained Rome until 1453. How do we reconcile catastrophic policy failures with history's most successful transformation? To understand this paradox, we start with what Diocletian built. He transformed the emperor from first citizen to divine untouchable figure, purple robes, elaborate ceremony. Visitors prostrated themselves before him. And this wasn't vanity, it was deliberate mystification. After 50 years of soldier emperors being assassinated by their own troops, Diocletian created distance between ruler and ruled, make the emperor seem superhuman, and perhaps soldiers would hesitate before murdering him. Now for his spectacular failure. The edict on maximum prices fixed prices across the empire. Violators faced death. The logic seemed sound. Inflation was destroying the economy, so cap prices and protect citizens. Here's why it couldn't work. Imagine severe inflation hits today. If the government decrees tomatoes can only cost $1 per pound, what happens? The farmer growing beautiful heirloom tomatoes won't sell them legally. He'd lose money on every sale. So legal markets fill with the worst produce while quality goods flow to black markets at real prices. This follows Gresham's law. Bad money drives out good. Right? With price controls, bad goods drive out good. Picture the spectrum. On one end, bruised, overripe tomatoes barely worth eating. On the other, perfect heirloom varieties. Draw a line in the middle. Everything left of that line goes to legal markets at $1. Everything right goes underground at $5. The farmer's choice is obvious. Enforcement didn't matter. The death penalty just drove more activity underground. The edict was abandoned within years. What actually worked? Tax reform that reduced currency debasement. Diocletian's reorganization shifted the empire's center of gravity. Rome became strategically irrelevant, too far from the frontiers that mattered. Milan rose because it offered quick access to the Danube and Rhine, where Germanic tribes threatened constantly. Frontier cities like Trier became major urban centers with theaters, arenas, and basilicas. The empire's resources now flowed to where threats actually existed. This geographic shift would prove more consequential than any policy. The price edict wasn't Diocletian's only failure. His religious persecution would prove even more ironic. It began with haruspicy, the practice of examining animal organs for divine messages. Priests inspected the liver, kidneys, and spleen of sacrificed animals, reading patterns as communications from the gods. When science proved repeatedly unfavorable, interpreters blamed Christians for angering traditional deities. Diocletian launched the empire's most systematic persecution. Christians were imprisoned, tortured, executed. Their scriptures were burned. Yet they didn't capitulate. Just 6 years after Diocletian's abdication, Constantine converted to Christianity. The persecution had failed completely. Here's the insight most histories miss. Diocletian persecuted Christianity while his own reforms were creating conditions that made Christianity's triumph inevitable. Consider the traditional system. Wealthy local elites tied to their cities maintained temples, funded games, kept civic order. A prominent family in Sardis might worship Cybele for generations. Devotion bound to place. 3rd century disruptions shattered this. Militarization elevated mobile soldiers over rooted notables. Increased taxation targeted the wealthy but not powerful. The cosmopolitan empire made local ties less relevant. Now imagine a soldier from North Africa stationed in Sardis. He has no connection to local gods, mobile populations, gravitate toward portable, universal religions. The causal chain runs clearly. 3rd century disruptions, militarization, heavy taxation, cosmopolitanism created two diverging paths. Local elites declined, mobile military personnel rose. This had direct religious implications. Place-bound cults lost their patrons and their logic. Universal religions gained inherent advantages. Christianity offered community anywhere in the empire. Walk into any city, find fellow believers, receive support. Local cults couldn't compete with that portability. Diocletian's administrative reforms accelerated this transformation by further empowering mobile military classes. He was simultaneously persecuting Christianity and building the social infrastructure that guaranteed its victory. Did anyone at the time recognize what Diocletian had accomplished? 4th century mosaics tell us yes. Dining room floors across the empire displayed mottos, Laeta tempora ubique, joyful times everywhere. Orbis restitutus, a world restored. Barbarians had been pushed back across the Danube and Rhine. Persians were contained on the eastern frontier. Yes, taxes were high. Yes, the new elite were less educated military men rather than cultured aristocrats. But prosperity had returned. People living through it felt the difference between chaos and stability. Walk through Trier today and you see Diocletian's legacy in stone. The Porta Nigra gateway still stands, a massive fortified entrance. The theater seated thousands. The arena hosted spectacles. The basilica served as imperial audience hall. This was a frontier city on the Rhine with every Roman amenity. Not a provincial backwater, but a fully realized urban center where emperors resided and administered. Diocletian's reorganization didn't just shift resources, it created new centers of civilization where the empire needed them most. Now, the astonishing timeline. Diocletian takes power in 284. His price edict lasts months before abandonment. His persecution lasts years before reversal. He abdicates in 305. The Western Empire survives another century until the conventional fall in the late 400s. Over 100 years of stability his reforms provided. But the Eastern Empire, Diocletianic administrative structures endured until Constantinople fell to the Ottomans in 1453. That's approximately 1200 years. The same bureaucratic divisions, the same military organization, the same tax systems, adapted and modified, but fundamentally continuous. Diocletian's price controls failed because they fought economic logic. His persecution failed because it forced social transformation. His own reforms accelerated. But his institutional architecture succeeded because it addressed real structural problems: how to defend long frontiers, how to administer vast territories, how to maintain stable succession. Structural change outlasts policy, even failed policy by the same leader.